In 2019, a private Hollywood memorabilia collector named Marcus Chen purchased what was advertised as a wardrobe piece from Marilyn Monroe's final film at a closed estate auction for $11,000, and when he had the garment professionally authenticated, the forensic analysis revealed something that made him immediately contact the FBI. The item was a white swimsuit, single piece, with a maker's label from the Fox costume department dated April 1962, and a handwritten tag reading MM-GG, May 23rd. GG stood for Something's Got to Give, and May 23rd was the date of Marilyn's famous nude swimming scene, the last footage ever filmed of her alive. But the authentication process revealed more than just provenance. The forensic textile analyst hired by Chen discovered biological stains on the swimsuit that had been partially cleaned but not completely removed. DNA testing on those stains came back with two profiles. One matched Marilyn Monroe's known genetic markers taken from hair samples preserved in memorabilia collections. The second DNA profile was male, and it didn't match any of the known male actors or crew members who worked on the film. More troubling was the analysis of the stains themselves. They weren't just blood. The forensic report identified traces of blood, semen, and vaginal fluid, a combination of biological evidence that suggested sexual activity, possibly non-consensual, given the presence of blood and the tearing pattern on the swimsuit's inner seam. Chen immediately understood the implications. This wasn't just a costume, it was potential evidence of a crime that occurred 67 years ago. Within 2 weeks, Chen received a letter from attorneys representing an unnamed party offering to purchase the swimsuit for $2 million, 20 times what he'd paid for it, with the condition that he sign an NDA about the forensic findings and surrender all copies of the analysis reports. Chen refused. The attorneys then claimed that the swimsuit had been stolen from Fox archives in the 1960s and therefore was not legal to own or sell. The case is currently in legal limbo, with the FBI holding the swimsuit as evidence in an investigation that may never be resolved because everyone involved in the original incident is dead. But the forensic reports exist, the DNA profiles exist, and the questions they raise about what happened to Marilyn Monroe on May 23, 1962, in Dressing Room 7 at 20th Century Fox Studios demand answers that Hollywood has spent 6 decades trying to bury. Before we dive into what really happened on Marilyn's last film set, if you want to uncover the dark secrets Hollywood tried to erase from history, please subscribe to our channel. We investigate the evidence they hoped would stay buried forever. Something's Gotta Give was supposed to be Marilyn Monroe's comeback vehicle, a romantic comedy that would prove she was still bankable, still the biggest star in Hollywood despite the struggles that had plagued her recent years. But from the moment production began in April 1962, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Marilyn was chronically late to set, sometimes arriving 4 or 5 hours after her call time, sometimes not showing up at all. She was taking massive amounts of barbiturates to sleep and amphetamines to function during the day, a pharmaceutical cocktail that left her foggy, forgetful, unable to remember her lines. Director George Cukor tried to be patient, but the delays were costing Fox thousands of dollars per day. The studio was already in financial crisis after the catastrophic budget overruns on Cleopatra, which was filming simultaneously in Rome. Fox couldn't afford another disaster. Studio executives began pressuring Cukor to get Marilyn under control or replace her. The production had been running for 6 weeks when May 23, 1962 arrived, a date that would become central to understanding Marilyn's final weeks. According to the official Fox production schedule, that day was marked as a company move day, meaning the crew would be relocating equipment but no actual filming would take place. The actors were not called to set, there was no scheduled photography. It should have been a quiet day on the lot with minimal personnel present, but that's not what happened. The first anomaly appears in the studio's security log, which recorded Marilyn Monroe's arrival at the main gate at 6:47 a.m., 3 hours before the crew was even scheduled to arrive, and on a day when she had no call time. Security guard Thomas Murphy noted in his log that Marilyn was driving herself, which was unusual and seemed agitated. She simply showed her pass and drove through to the sound stages. What was Marilyn doing at Fox Studios at 6:47 a.m. on a day when she wasn't supposed to be there? At approximately 7:15 a.m., Murphy was making his rounds when he heard raised voices coming from dressing room 7, which had been assigned to Marilyn. Murphy's incident report, which was filed that morning but sealed by Fox Legal within 48 hours and not released until 2017, states that he heard a male voice and a female voice arguing, and that he distinctly heard the female voice say, "You can't keep doing this to me," followed by the sound of breaking glass. Murphy approached the door and knocked, identifying himself as studio security. The voices immediately stopped. After approximately 30 seconds, the door opened and Marilyn appeared, wearing a bathrobe over what looked like a white swimsuit. She smiled at Murphy and told him everything was fine, she'd just dropped a mirror. Murphy noted that Marilyn's hands were shaking as she held the door, and that he could see broken glass on the floor behind her, but it appeared to be from a drinking glass, not a mirror. He asked if anyone else was in the dressing room. Marilyn said no, she was alone. Murphy asked if she needed medical attention because he thought he saw what looked like blood on her bathrobe. Marilyn glanced down at the spot, touched it, and said it was just makeup, stage blood from a previous production. She thanked him and closed the door. Murphy walked away, but something bothered him. He stationed himself where he could observe dressing room 7 without being obvious. Approximately 20 minutes later, at 7:36 a.m., the dressing room door opened and a man emerged. Murphy's report describes the man only as a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, dark hair, wearing a suit and tie, approximately 40 to 50 years old. The report does not name this man, but it notes that he appeared to be in a hurry and avoided making eye contact as he walked quickly toward the parking area reserved for studio executives and VIP visitors. The man got into a dark sedan and left the lot. Murphy returned to dressing room 7 and knocked again. This time Marilyn took longer to answer, and when she did, Murphy noticed she'd changed into street clothes and was carrying a large tote bag. She told Murphy she was leaving for the day, that she wasn't feeling well. She walked to her car and left the lot at approximately 8:15 a.m. What Murphy didn't know was what Marilyn had left behind in that dressing room. At approximately 10 a.m., costume supervisor May Reese entered dressing room 7 to retrieve the wardrobe pieces that Marilyn had been fitted for. Reese found the white swimsuit that had been custom-made for Marilyn's pool scene hanging on the back of the bathroom door. It was damp, as if it had been recently washed, but there were still visible stains on the fabric, rust-colored stains that Reese immediately recognized as blood. She examined the swimsuit more carefully and noticed that the stains were concentrated in the crotch area and along the inner thighs. There was also what appeared to be a small tear in the seam near the hip. Reese, who had worked in Hollywood costume departments for 20 years, knew that this was not normal wear and tear. She immediately filed a report with her supervisor, noting the condition of the garment and recommending that it be photographed and logged before cleaning. The report included Reese's observation that the staining pattern and damage to the garment suggest possible injury to the performer and should be investigated by studio medical staff. This report was filed at 10:47 a.m. on May 23, 1962. By 2 p.m. that same day, the report had been removed from the costume department files. Reese was called into a meeting with Fox legal representatives and told that the swimsuit was simply stained from a makeup test, that there was no cause for concern, and that discussing the matter with anyone outside the legal department would be considered a breach of her employment contract and grounds for immediate termination. Reese signed an NDA that day. But before the report was removed from her files, she made a copy and kept it in her personal records. That copy was discovered after her death in 1994 and eventually made its way to Marilyn Monroe researchers. Despite whatever had happened that morning in dressing room 7, Marilyn returned to the Fox lot on May 25, 2 days after the incident, to film the swimming pool scene that would become the last footage ever shot of her alive. The scene called for Marilyn to swim nude in a pool, a daring choice for 1962 designed to generate publicity and prove that at 36 years old, Marilyn Monroe still had the body that had made her famous. Director George Cukor planned to shoot it in a closed set with only essential crew present to make Marilyn feel comfortable. The studio's still photographer, Lawrence Schiller, was given exclusive access to document the scene, and his photographs from that day would become iconic. Marilyn in the water, her blonde hair slicked back, her expression serene and otherworldly, like she was already halfway to somewhere else. But the people who were present on set that day noticed something troubling about Marilyn's physical condition. Makeup artist Alan Whitey Snyder, who had worked with Marilyn for over a decade, saw bruises on her upper arms when she removed her robe before entering the pool. Dark purple fingerprint-shaped bruises, the kind that come from someone grabbing you hard enough to leave marks. Snyder quietly asked Marilyn if she was okay, if someone had hurt her. Marilyn smiled and said she was just clumsy, always bumping into things. Snyder didn't believe her, but he knew better than to push. He used heavy concealer to cover the bruises before filming began. He also noticed that Marilyn seemed to be moving carefully, almost gingerly, like someone who was in pain but trying to hide it. The footage from that day is haunting to watch with the knowledge of what would come later. Marilyn in the water, naked and vulnerable, performing for a camera one last time. Schiller later said in interviews that Marilyn seemed almost peaceful, resigned, like she'd made some kind of decision about her life. He also said that between takes, Marilyn stayed in the water longer than necessary, just floating on her back with her eyes closed, and that at one point he saw tears running down her face. Marilyn opened her eyes, smiled at him and said, "No, it's just the chlorine." But there was no chlorine in the pool. It was a saltwater pool, specifically installed for this scene. Marilyn was crying. The camera captured her beauty. It didn't capture her pain. 2 weeks after filming the pool scene, on June 8, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was fired from Something's Got to Give. The official reason cited was chronic absenteeism and breach of contract. Marilyn had missed 22 of the 32 scheduled shooting days. Fox announced they were suing Marilyn for $500,000 for her unprofessional behavior and the financial losses caused by the production delays. The film was shut down, and Marilyn, despite being the biggest movie star in the world, suddenly found herself unemployable in Hollywood. No other studio would touch her because Fox had made an example of her. 58 days later, on August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home. The official cause of death was ruled as probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates. But the circumstances of her death have been questioned and investigated for 6 decades, and the questions always come back to the same place: what really happened to Marilyn in the weeks before she died, and who wanted her silenced? Within hours of Marilyn's death being announced, 20th Century Fox executives began a systematic effort to control the narrative and protect the studio from any potential scandal. On August 6th, the day after Marilyn's body was discovered, Fox security personnel entered Soundstage 14, where Something's Got to Give had been filmed, and removed all remaining costume pieces, props, and production materials related to Marilyn's work on the film. The items removed were not logged into the studio's inventory system, they simply disappeared. Among the items that vanished, the white swimsuit from the pool scene, all of Marilyn's wardrobe pieces, her personal items from dressing room 7, and according to some accounts, sections of film negative that had not yet been developed. The studio also moved quickly to secure NDAs from everyone who had worked on the production. These agreements specifically prohibited anyone from discussing incidents of a personal or medical nature involving Miss Monroe, or any observations regarding Miss Monroe's physical condition or behavior not directly related to her professional performance. The contracts included penalty clauses of $50,000 for violations, a staggering sum in 1962, equivalent to roughly $500,000 today. Most crew members signed without question because they needed to work in Hollywood and couldn't afford to be blacklisted. Perhaps most troubling is what happened to the official studio records. When researchers began investigating Marilyn's final film in the 1980s and 1990s, they discovered that key documents were missing from Fox archives. The daily production reports for May 23rd through May 28th, the period covering the incident in the dressing room and the filming of the pool scene, were not in the archives files. Security logs from that same period had pages removed. The costume department's master inventory showed gaps in the numbering sequence suggesting pages had been extracted. Documents related to routine production matters survived. Documents related to Marilyn's personal incidents during that specific time period disappeared. Dr. Ralph Greenson was Marilyn Monroe's psychiatrist during her final years, and he documented their sessions in meticulous detail. Portions of Greenson's notes have been obtained by researchers over the years, and they paint a picture of a woman who was trapped between her desire to tell the truth and her fear of the consequences. In a session note dated June 4, 1962, 4 days before Marilyn was fired, Greenson wrote, "Patient arrived in severe distress. Reports being threatened by studio executives regarding potential disclosure of incident on film set. Patient states she has physical evidence of assault, but is afraid to report it because she believes she will not be believed and will instead be labeled as unstable or attention-seeking. Patient expresses feeling of hopelessness, states nobody cares what happens to me as long as I keep playing the part they want me to play." In another session from June 20th, Greenson documented, "Patient showed me bruising on arms and legs that she states are from recent physical altercation, though she refuses to identify the individual responsible. When pressed, patient became agitated and said, 'If I tell you who it is, you won't believe me. And even if you did believe me, you couldn't do anything about it because he's too important.'" The most troubling note is dated July 28, 1962, just 8 days before Marilyn's death. Greenson wrote, "Emergency session at patient's request. Patient in severe crisis state. Reports that they are planning something though cannot or will not specify who they are. Patient has expressed suicidal ideation for first time in several weeks. When asked about triggers, patient stated, 'I know too much and they know I know too much and I'm not going to keep quiet anymore.' Extremely concerned about patient's deteriorating mental state and her physical safety, considering hospitalization if situation does not improve." Greenson saw Marilyn for what would be their final session on August 4, 1962. According to his notes, Marilyn seemed calmer than she'd been in weeks, almost serene. She told him she'd made some decisions about her life, that she was going to stop letting people use her, that she was going to start telling the truth even if it cost her everything. Less than 24 hours later, Marilyn was dead. What many people don't know is that the FBI had an active file on Marilyn Monroe at the time of her death. The FBI's interest in Marilyn was because of who she was associating with. By 1962, Marilyn had become romantically involved with both John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. The FBI, under Director J. Edgar Hoover, had both Kennedy brothers under surveillance, and by extension, they were monitoring Marilyn's activities as well. The FBI file on Marilyn Monroe, partially declassified over the years, contains 145 pages, including surveillance reports, phone tap transcripts, and interviews with confidential informants. One memo dated May 28, 1962, 3 days after Marilyn filmed the pool scene, notes that subject Monroe was observed leaving 20th Century Fox Studios in a distressed state and drove directly to the residence of Dr. Ralph Greenson, her psychiatrist, where she remained for approximately 3 hours. Another memo from June 15 reports that informant states subject Monroe has been making threats to hold a press conference regarding her treatment by studio executives and her relationships with high-ranking government officials. The most significant entry is a memo dated July 18, 1962, 18 days before Marilyn's death. Informant reports that subject Monroe is in possession of evidence that could be damaging to individuals currently under Bureau investigation. Subject has allegedly threatened to make this evidence public if certain personal demands are not met. Recommend continued monitoring of subjects' communications and activities. 60 years after Marilyn Monroe's death, the questions raised by May 23, 1962, remain unanswered. Who was the man that security guard Thomas Murphy saw leaving Marilyn's dressing room that morning? Why was Marilyn at the studio 3 hours early on a day when she wasn't scheduled to work? What caused the blood on the white swimsuit, and who was the source of the male DNA found mixed with Marilyn's biological material? Why did Fox work so aggressively to suppress information about what happened during those final weeks? And most troubling, did what happened on the set of Something's Gotta Give contribute to her death 75 days later? Some researchers believe the answer is yes. They point to Marilyn's behavior after May 23rd, the increased paranoia, the statements about knowing too much, the threats to hold a press conference, the deteriorating relationship with Fox executives. They argue that Marilyn was assaulted on the set, had evidence of the assault, and when she threatened to go public, powerful people decided she had to be silenced. Other researchers are more cautious, arguing that the evidence is suggestive but not conclusive, and that Marilyn's death could have been exactly what it appeared to be, a tragic overdose by a deeply troubled woman struggling with addiction and depression. But even skeptics acknowledge that something happened to Marilyn on that set, something serious enough for Fox to seal records and require NDAs from dozens of people. The story of the bloody swimsuit is about more than just one actress and one film. It's about how Hollywood has always treated women, especially beautiful, famous women, as commodities to be used, controlled, and discarded when they become inconvenient. It's about how powerful men have always been protected by systems designed to preserve their reputations, while the women they harm are dismissed as unstable, unreliable, attention-seeking. It's about how truth gets buried when it threatens profit and power. Marilyn Monroe died believing that nobody would believe her if she told them what had been done to her. She was probably right. In 1962, a woman accusing a powerful man of assault would have been labeled hysterical, vengeful, money-seeking. She would have been destroyed professionally and personally, while her attacker faced no consequences. It's a pattern that continued for decades after Marilyn's death, until the Me Too movement finally created space for women to speak about abuse and be believed. The white swimsuit, with its stains and tears and DNA evidence, sits in an FBI storage facility, neither fully investigated nor fully dismissed, a piece of evidence in a case that will never go to trial because everyone involved is dead. And Marilyn Monroe, who wanted nothing more than to be taken seriously as an actress and to be loved for who she really was, remains frozen in time as a symbol of beauty, of tragedy, of the price that fame extracts. The cameras captured her beauty. They didn't capture her pain. They didn't capture what was done to her. They didn't capture the truth. But the evidence remains, and the questions remain, and somewhere, someone knows what really happened on May 23, 1962. They've just never told the truth.